I watched the presidential debate last night with a few friends at my home, the room right behind this one, and it was a really lovely experience. Yeah, oftentimes in introspective spiritual communities, there can be like a real disconnection from the world, the manifested world, and politics is such an important facet of it. That it felt good to find a bunch of people who are, you know, quite introspective on different embodied spiritual paths and are like interested in hearing the two presidential candidates for um, the most important country in the world um, debate it out. And now I'm gonna watch and react to Vivek Ramaswamy reacting to the Trump-Harris debate. Vivek Ramaswamy is the person that turned me essentially, for lack of better language. Watching him do interviews and take on hecklers and just be able to maintain composure, calmness, and openness to conversation while also maintaining good boundaries was so inspiring for me. And I was able to see sides of Trump that I couldn't at first see. So yeah, big fan of Vivek Ramaswamy. So let's get right into it.
I had the chance to attend the debate in Philadelphia last night, the spin room at least around the debate, and it was an interesting experience. It was even quite a bit different than the CNN debate. That was the one in Atlanta. The environment was different. It was a lot more organized. It was a lot more structured. Just even the way the press was run, the way the entire city was being run around it, the environment around the debate, it had a sense of organization to it in a way that the last debate didn't have. And I share that it's a small detail, but to take people a little bit behind the curtain for what I do think is going on here, because I think there are some parallels between the last debate and this one in a deeper sense. I think there's a deeper project at work in the narrative that the media is trying to sell the public. Now, what was interesting to me was heading into this debate, the expectations were set low, and I believe purposefully low for Kamala Harris. I believe in calling a spade a spade. Did she exceed the purposefully low expectations that were set for her? I think that she did. But I think that this is part of an interesting pattern, and I think a concerning pattern dating back to how the media handled the last debate. You can't view the last night's debate with Kamala Harris without actually understanding it against the context of the first debate that Trump had with Biden. And I was at that one as well in Atlanta. Here's the truth. That last debate did something unique for the media that they really needed in order to bank their credibility with voters, and it was this. They set the earliest ever presidential debate in U.S. history. In the history of televised presidential debates, that was the earliest one in history. And that wasn't some accident. It was a negotiating condition for at that point, the Biden-Harris campaign. They said they would not have debates, but these are the terms on which they were going to agree to have a debate. They were only going to have a debate, they said, if this was the schedule of debates. They had this one scheduled with ABC for September on the date that exactly we had it last night, September 10th. But they would only agree to that if there was also an earlier debate in the month of June, before either the Democrats or even the Republicans had formally nominated their candidate. That was the first time that's happened in the history of televised presidential debates in a general election. Now, at that debate, in the lead up to the debate, you had no expectations one way or another that was set for Biden because it was a trial balloon. The reason they negotiated that was it was what in the world of finance or business you would call a free call option. That means that you have the option to exercise it, say you're a candidate, but you don't have to. That's exactly what Democrats bought themselves. It was a bit of a trap that was laid for Trump and for the Republicans to say that if Trump beat Biden so badly that he was going to win the election versus Biden, they would still have enough time to swap him out, but if Biden somehow surpassed and exceeded expectations, that would have reset the otherwise failing race. Well, they succeeded in getting that debate. Trump wiped the floor with Joe Biden. The whole country saw it. And that started the call to actually get Biden off the top of the ticket. Now, that did two things. Not only did that result in a free call option for Democrats where they were able to figure out that their then current candidate wasn't going to be a winner, they got to swap him out for free. But it also did something really important for the media, and that's the link to last night's debate. What it did is it created a shock to the American audience, to the American voters, that even many previously left-leaning networks, cable networks, print, digital media publications, all decided to be critical of Biden in a way that they hadn't been critical of a Democrat for a really long time. They were more critical of Joe Biden during the early part of that summer than they were of Donald Trump or of Republicans. And what that did was that banked a certain amount of credibility that the media gained with the public. And I think that was the second untold benefit of what happened after that first debate. So the first is the Democrats got a free option. It says, you know what, if the trial balloon works, we'll ride the horse that we're on. If not, we'll switch to a different horse. That was strictly value creating, getting a free call option. Call options have value, and they got something that had value that they previously didn't have, was the option to swap out their candidate. But it wasn't just the Democrats that it helped. I think it gave the media and restored and rebuilt and rehabilitated credibility that a lot of the political media had lost to the public by saying that, you know what, now we criticize Democrats. We're going to talk about Biden's cognitive deficits. We're going to talk about his poor performance in the debate. We're going to talk about how he has ducked questions, even as the sitting U.S. president, pontificating about the threats to our democracy, failing to partake in the most basic norm of a U.S. president to communicate exactly what he's doing and why he's doing it, and to answer even modest, if not tough, questions from the press. We saw the New York Times, you saw CNN, you saw which hosted the debate, you saw the Washington Post, you see every major mainstream media outlet then not only turning on Joe Biden, but treating him with the same harsh inquiry and treatment that they've treated Donald Trump for years. Now, that allowed them to sweep under the rug the fact that for 3 years, they actually covered for Biden and his cognitive deficits. They covered for Biden and his policy failures. They covered even for some of his most disastrous policy failures, like the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan and the way that that was executed. They completely swept that under the rug for 3 years. But in 3 short weeks, they were able to rebank some of that credibility by saying, no, we're not biased media. They'll say that the media leans Democrat. No, here's our best proof that we don't lean Democrat. We're most critical of the Democratic president of the United States and the Democratic nominee for U.S. president in a race versus Donald Trump, where at least for those 3 short weeks in June and into early July, they could say that, no, we actually are treating Joe Biden even more critically than we are Donald Trump based on his performance. And like it or not, I just think it's a hard fact that much of the public, especially those who aren't dialed into American politics every day or the political media or weren't paying particular attention to the primary process, said that, you know what, maybe these people are more balanced than conservatives or others may claim. This is not a biased media. I could see them right before my eyes criticizing Joe Biden, criticizing the sitting Democratic president of the United States, criticizing the Democratic nominee even in his race against Donald Trump. So those are the 2 objectives accomplished by that prior debate. And that's what really laid the groundwork for yesterday's debate, which, remember, was not scheduled after or anything else. It was scheduled as part of
The main point I want to highlight here is his emphasis or his explanation on these are his hypotheses, you can agree or disagree with them, but he's attempting to present a nuanced breakdown of what is happening behind the scenes, like beyond the words, the meta game, so to speak. And if one is only like cursorily involved in political news in a consumptive fashion, it can be easy to miss the meta games, like the games happening behind the games. That's not to claim that I have any kind of full visibility into this. I don't. And at the same time, I encounter people who have absolutely zero visibility or awareness of what is happening behind the words, behind the caricature being portrayed. And when I watched the debate yesterday, I just could see the character that Kamala Harris was playing. Like she was playing a character that was very hollow, and it had very. I mean, I'm not a theater major in any ways, but it was a very underdeveloped character and had predictability. Like it's like watching a movie that is extremely predictable, like what the character is going to do, versus watching a movie where the character has depth, the character feels alive, and there is nuance and depth to what the character does. And her character was, a combination of like some kind of a sob story. Like she talked about her high school friend who was sexually assaulted. She had like this emotive channeling of stories of 12, 13-year-old girls being raped and becoming pregnant. And I feel for such humans who have to go through such horrific abuse. I truly feel for it. And from my perspective, she was using these sob stories. Like she was like really, like that was an aspect of the character she was playing, because these stories were dropped at like the right points to evoke a certain emotional response so that then she could turn on something against Trump. And she was simultaneously playing this character of like joyful, like smiling all the time, like party, it's great, hope. Like that's kind of one of the characters she has. And indignance towards Trump as the bad man. So yeah, I wanted to highlight that aspect of it. Like, yeah, you gotta see where you can predict what someone else is going to say. And if you can predict, then it's probably not their alive self, like they're playing some conditioned character, either intentionally or unintentionally.
Exact same plan, right? The negotiated conditions for these presidential debates locked in both of those debates at the same time. ABC on September 10th, CNN in June. And that was all part of, this is not some sort of speculative conspiracy theory. It's just a statement of fact that was a negotiated plan that the Democrats agreed to as the condition for allowing Joe Biden to debate, was there were going to be two debates, one on September 10th, one in June. Why wasn't there going to be one in July or August? Why wasn't there going to be ones scheduled at the usual time they have presidential debates in September and October? No, it was going to be June, and it was going to be September, and it was going to be under those pre-specified conditions. They're linked. There's a deep link between the conditions that created. It gave the Democrats enough time between June and September to swap out their nominee if Biden performed poorly, which he did. But it also allowed the media to shore up their credibility such that whatever they were going to do in potentially tilting the scales of how this election was going to be portrayed in the fall, they had to shore up a deficit of credibility they had with the American public. That's what was accomplished with that first debate in June. So then we get to what exactly happened. They won back that credibility, and you bank that capital, that political capital and social capital with the public, only to then deploy it last night. And I think that what we see both last night, and others have said it, I said it, I'll say it again, what was effectively a 3-on-1 debate, that would have been one thing if people went into that without having seen the media criticize Joe Biden. But now they have this artificial illusion that, hey, the media is balanced. We trust the way the mainstream media is running this. They were critical of Biden. They were excoriating him. They were harsher on him than Trump. To now, through that sleight of hand, to say, okay, we're actually going to have a 3-on-1 versus Donald Trump, and we're going to allegedly fact check one candidate without stopping Kamala Harris at a single one of the many lies, the many deceptive facts or deceptive statements that she made last night on the debate stage, with still the aura of objectivity and credibility. I think that is actually, in some ways, more devious and more dangerous and more deceptive than if they had just stopped the charade around the Joe Biden bit around the month of June. That's exactly what ended up playing out last night. So they stopped Donald Trump to fact-check him for things that he didn't even say. I thought it was remarkable that one of the two moderators stepped in for the first time in the evening just to make an assertion. So this is during the topic of abortion, Donald Trump spoke about the fact that many Democrats have favored radical policies that would permit abortion all the way up to the time of birth. He cited that there are Democratic politicians in certain states that have advanced certain measures. That's what he said. Now, one of the two moderators last night stepped in to fact-check Donald Trump when she was contradicting something that he didn't even actually say. She said that, just to be clear, there are no states today that allow abortion after or at the time of birth. That's not what he said, but to somebody who isn't watching this very carefully at home, who's just tuning in, disconnected, God bless them and thank, probably better for them, from American politics, but checking in on this presidential debate, it allows them to say, okay, Donald Trump said something, I don't remember exactly what he said, but this objective moderator from media networks that I know, I get a sense are objective because they were objective, they were hitting Biden just as hard as they were hitting Trump, now comes out and says, no, Donald Trump has just been put in his place through a lie that he told when he actually didn't tell a lie at all, but that's the appearance they cultivate. To then do that systematically over the course of last night, that was the beginning of a pattern that you saw yesterday in Philadelphia, without actually doing the same for what were a much wider range and a deeper and more concerning set of lies that Kamala Harris told with a straight face yesterday. Talk about the number of times she brought up Project 2025. You might like some of the things that Project 2025 has to say, you might not. But whether or not you like it, and some conservatives haven't loved Donald Trump's position distancing himself from that, but it doesn't matter. You have people on both sides have their own views on the substance of it. Project 2025 is a different set of policy objectives than that have been embraced by Donald Trump. He has distanced himself from it publicly. He says that he's had nothing to do with it. He doesn't even know what's in there. Kamala Harris knows this and yet purposefully used that in a way that if the debate moderators were using the same standard they used to, quote-unquote, fact-check Donald Trump, to say that, okay, because you said that some Democrats are in favor of abortion and permitting abortion all the way up to the time of birth, that somehow we're going to fact-check you by pretending that you said that some states actually allow it, and we're going to come in and make sure that our audience is informed of that assertion. If you're applying that same standard to the other side, if Kamala Harris is saying that Donald Trump is going to implement Project 2025, you would expect that same debate moderator to say, in fairness, as a fact-check to the audience whose perceptions they care so much to protect, you might predict that moderator would say, but yes, Donald Trump has disavowed that several times over, Vice President Harris, so we would appreciate your clarification on that. Didn't hear a word of it. Same thing with respect to the federal abortion ban. She said point blank that Donald Trump would sign a federal abortion ban, when in fact he has been clear, to the point of even getting criticism from some on the right for it, that he would not sign a federal abortion ban into law. Same thing with respect to her insinuations that Donald Trump has insulted the military. There hasn't been a shred of evidence that Donald Trump said what the many in the then media alleged that he did. It's now been debunked that Donald Trump ever said something disparaging.
This is the other thing I noticed in the debate yesterday. There was a lot of appeal to authority that Kamala Harris was engaging in. Like when she presented like this military thing that Vivek is referring to, Kamala Harris talked about how a bunch of military generals think Donald Trump is a disgrace. And this is, I'm referencing a logical fallacy called appeal to authority, which is when you are engaged in a debate with someone. To support your point, you appeal to what you consider as an authority. They said, you are a disgrace, so you are a disgrace. So it's like simultaneously distancing yourself from what you're claiming, but then leveraging an authority. It's like if I were to, if I was like 8 years old and I were to go to my 3-year-old sister and tell her, my mom told you to give me this chocolate and not eat it. So I'm like appealing to that authority to convince my sister of something. And yeah, the most egregious example of appeal to authority that I personally felt in Kamala Harris's statements was talking about how a bunch of Harvard and Wharton economists have concluded that her economic plan is better than Donald Trump's economic plan, and that I think she said something about like if Donald Trump were to become president by 2025, we'll be deep in recession. And it's reasonable to share the input of academic economists. Like, I'm not saying it's not reasonable. And at the same time, when I take that in with the three main practical aspects of her policy, like beyond all of the name calling Trump, talking about her own history, like Tim Walz's history, her ethnic identity, like beyond all of that noise, the three main economic points that stood out to me were 3 tax credits for first-time parents, first-time homeowners, and small startup business creators. And when I think of the economy at large and look at the rising inflation problem, which is quite a reality right now in the US, like we are under inflation in the last 2 years. It's like directly felt if you've been paying attention to your own grocery bills this year. The 3 points that she has seem like band-aid fixes to, like, inflation is a systemic problem in the economy, and systemic problems cannot be fixed with band-aids. It's kind of like telling someone with deep sexual trauma that I'll give you allowance to get oxycodone every month for a year, and that's my solution for fixing all of the symptoms that come from your childhood sexual abuse. The trauma is a systemic problem. It cannot be fixed with a band-aid solution. You can control it with a band-aid solution, stem the impact of it, but you cannot fix it. So it just felt like a very weak appeal to authority to me. And like, it's not like economics is a perfect science. Like, economists have had horrible predictions. Like, academic economists have had terrible predictions, like, all the fucking time. Economists are coming up with like random fucking theories all the time that are like not validated, and we don't even know which specific economists have signed off on this. Like, it's not like every professor at Harvard and Wharton is doing the best, most passionate, powerful work of their lives that they cannot be paid to create research to support something. Like, it's just ridiculous to have this like very blanket appeal to authority, like, oh, my academic economists have like said my plan is better, and all I'm doing is like handing out what is it, like $5,000 in subsidy, $25,000 in subsidy, $50,000 in tax credit. It's like just one time taking less tax. It just seems extra ridiculous to me in light of these three specific ideas that she keeps talking about is what she will do on day one, which when I contrast with what Trump intends to do on day one, which is bring the Russia-Ukraine war to a peace deal, bring Israel-Hamas possibly to a close, and his track record in terms of ability to negotiate with horrible dictators like I remember the media. I think the media still like lambasts him for being buddies with Kim Jong Un, and it's so childish to look at it that way. Like whether you like Kim Jong Un or not, like he's the leader of a nuclear armed nation, and in my view, it is better that you negotiate. That doesn't mean you bend over backwards. I think people who don't know how to negotiate think of negotiating as like playing weak. In fact, my sense is that the establishment politicians who are like take the kind of moral high horse and like we won't negotiate with Russia, we won't negotiate with North Korea, my sense is that I want to look into the numbers on this. I wonder if someone has dived into it. If you are someone who has dived into this, please let me know in the comments. But I truly wonder what politicians are being funded by like the military industrial complex, because I can imagine if I was being funded by the military industrial complex like weapons manufacturers, it would benefit me to take the moral high horse and not be willing to negotiate with Putin, because if I negotiate between Putin and Zelensky, the war comes to a close, then these arms manufacturers cut my funding. So yeah, kind of circling back to seeing beneath the words, beneath the what they're saying, like the game behind the game, which is kind of the theme of this breakdown that Vivek is presenting. It feels important to highlight that, that there is this I truly wonder what Kamala Harris's links to the military industrial complex look like, because one question that she hardly answered, and I'm actually surprised that the moderators did not push her on it, like any sitting president, like if someone is running for the office of the president and they are currently in the government as a president or as a vice president, doesn't matter if it is Democrat or Republican, they should absolutely be grilled on, like if they're proposing something, they should absolutely be grilled on, why haven't you done it already? It's like, that just seems so basic to me. Like, does it not seem basic to you? Like if I'm already in office and I'm asking you to vote for me to re-elect me and I'm making a promise, then it almost feels like it would be out of integrity for me to make a promise and not tell you how it differs from the work I have done already. Like, is it aligned with the work I'm doing already? Is it aligned with my previous promise? And if it is aligned, then what is the work I've done already? What is the work I'm planning to finish by the end of my term? And then what is the work that I intend to do when I get into office? And Kamala Harris has dodged these questions, and she hasn't even been grilled enough on these questions. And this is where I fucking wish that she did internet interviews, just like, because all of these like independent creators on the internet who do not answer to anyone, they're just kind of living their lives and creating content on YouTube because that's their passion, me included. It's like, I'll just ask, we will just ask the questions that come to our mind. There is no one like telling us what questions are valid to be asked, what questions are not valid to be asked. And this is where I feel outraged that she has just like not done any internet interviews. And there was just that one interview with CNN, which, before listening to this breakdown from Vivek, I actually thought that the journalists really pushed her on some aspects. But looking back at it, I feel like they didn't push her hard enough to get the answers out. Like the energy, like in their energy, there was a pushiness, but really, like, they weren't able to get past this, like, what I call her shallow character that she's playing with these few different things that she keeps using, her identity as a mother, her identity as a stepmother, I suppose, her identity as a former DA who has prosecuted child sex abuse cases, her identity as a woman, her identity as half Indian, half black, then the kind of Instagram caption worthy lines that she says, which are it's the beautiful lines, but they're very hollow. It's kind of like a classic Instagram influencer account where people are just copy pasting captions from other Instagram influencers and just posting their selfies to get validation, and then like shitting on Trump. Beyond that, it's like really difficult to get out specifics from her. And I'm like really happy about the overall change in the fact that Trump is doing so many interviews on the internet. It's just difficult to like buy off these many independent creators. I mean, I don't think it's impossible, but you can kind of gauge from the energy of the questioning that's happening, I suppose. I mean, I don't know. I haven't listened to those many interviews with Trump, but definitely I've seen many interviews of Vivek handling like very difficult questions, and it's really impressive how Vivek handles difficult questions. Okay, that was a bit of a ramble. Let's continue watching this video.
Disparaging about military members. It was a hoax that was perpetuated by the political opposition. Kamala Harris asserted it last night as though it was fact without going challenged by the moderators. Same thing with respect to her false claim that Donald Trump somehow claimed that it was just fine people on both sides of what happened in Charlottesville. If you look at the entire context of what he said, it was a clear quote. It's been debunked even by left of center publications since. She said it with a straight face, though. And the problem is many voters at home, many people watching this debate at home, have really no ability to tell that difference. It's a good thing. I don't blame Americans. Most Americans should not have their lives consumed with following partisan political jousting. I don't think it's good for the country. I don't think it's good for most people. But I also think it's good for most people still to be engaged in being able to know what each candidate has said, what they haven't said, what they stand, what they don't stand for. And yet the media that claimed this artifice of being objective in the way they went after Joe Biden after his CNN performance, and the way they went after Donald Trump last night, completely failing to apply that same standard to Kamala Harris when they know that this myth about what Donald Trump said after the Charlottesville incident was actually dishonest. They did not call her out on it once. Straight down the list: Project 2205, federal abortion ban, insinuations about what he said in the military, the Charlottesville fine people hoax, the fact that she claimed that cops died. Effectively, she directly implied that, say what you will about what happened on January 6th, there were no people who were killed, no cops who were killed. And Donald Trump factually said it. The only person who was actually killed at the Capitol that day was Ashley Babbitt. Think about her statements about Xi Jinping and COVID-19. This is particularly rich last night. The moment where she said, Donald Trump said that Xi Jinping was my friend, or something to that effect, when she was now concerned that Xi Jinping was not being transparent about the origin and the causes of COVID-19. Whoa, just wait a minute. Go back to the actual facts of this debate back in the year 2020. They were calling Donald Trump a racist for calling this a Chinese virus. You could have called it a Brazilian strain or the South African strain or the India strain. That's totally fine. But if you called it the Chinese strain, then somehow that was racist. That's what they were saying about Donald Trump back then. But she's banking on the fact that voters don't remember exactly what the truth was back then to create and invent a new reality, that Donald Trump somehow was the one who was cozying up to Xi Jinping when he proposed a travel ban from China that many in the Democratic Party opposed, when he proposed greater transparency and labeled it even the China virus, the Wuhan virus. They called him a racist for saying it. Now, 4 years later, Kamala Harris is saying that Donald Trump was claiming Xi Jinping was my friend when Xi Jinping was not transparent about the causes, about the origin of COVID-19, it was many, even in the...
This is something I wanted to comment on, which is again that, if the president of the US is on good terms with the president of China, that is a positive, like a net positive for the world. That doesn't mean they agree on everything. I think many people have a very limited understanding of what a friendship could be, because so many people have conflict averse friendships, like they are afraid to get into conflicts with their friends. So from that comes this like very childish idea. Like it really feels so childish to me to not be friends or not have what I would say open channels of communication with other important powerful countries in the world. And I'm so happy in a way how, like, I don't know what came out of that trip, but like Prime Minister Modi of India visited Russia, Ukraine, and Poland, all three. And that is a good thing. Like it is good to try to resolve conflict in your own community. It is good to try to resolve conflict in the world. That takes the world closer to closer to global peace. Doesn't matter whether this is my own value. It doesn't matter whether two nations agree on their values. One could be extremely communist, the other could be like very capitalist, but it's a good thing for the leaders to have open lines of communication, because otherwise we risk escalation. So presenting that Donald Trump is friends with Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un as like a negative feels so childishly idiotic to me. And really, the parts of me that are trying to sense the links of the military industrial complex into the political establishment start tingling. It's like, why would she consider that? Why would she consider not negotiating or not having lines of negotiation a positive thing? And she said that about in like the Taliban and Camp David too. Like whether you like them or not, the Taliban are the present rulers of Afghanistan. They were ruling Afghanistan even before. You would call them a terrorist organization, but for all from the point of view of global diplomacy, they are the rulers of Afghanistan. Whether you agree or disagree with their ways, like being able to negotiate with them is a positive. And she had this like all I'm gonna enact it out. It's like, Camp David is such a respectful place, and he invited the Taliban into Camp David. That is such a disgrace to US military. Like, how the fuck is that a disgrace if it achieves the end result of the Taliban agreeing to like not kill American civilians and army folks? Again, I have to like fact check. Like he followed it up with his response saying that for 18 months no Americans were killed. If that is true, then it is a very good thing that he was able to invite the Taliban into Camp David. And I might insert a clip here of like two. It was quite an interesting clip to watch. It's like two black men who were members of his negotiation team or something, like talk about how he negotiated with the Taliban. And when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, that's the kind of negotiations I want the US president to be able to do. Like to be able to show the capacity to destroy someone, but then not destroy. Like that to me is like the epitome of martial artistry. It's like to show your capacity to step in and slay someone, but then make it clear that you have the capacity, but then not act on it. Like, that is good diplomacy. And I might insert that clip in. But the moral posturing she was doing around how it was disrespectful to invite the Taliban into Camp David, while also not taking ownership of the fact that the US did have a very disastrous exit from Afghanistan, like losing so much, like $85 billion of military equipment, and I don't know how many servicemen died. Like, it just feels so childish to me. Like, what? And facetious and hollow. It's like, why do you care so much about, why do you care more about this hollow or shallow sense of respect that you have for Camp David, where you wouldn't invite the Taliban into them, but care less about executing a deal that ensures peace, safety, protection of US resources in the region? It just doesn't agree with how I orient.
Biden administration afterwards that were trying to cover up for the origin of that pandemic. Now, one of the things I thought was most remarkable about last night, this list of inconsistencies and lies continued throughout. The moderators could have called her out at any point on any of these questions if they were applying the same standard they did to Trump. But one of the most remarkable parts about this is her ability to present herself as some sort of transcendent, unifying figure, saying we don't want to go back to the name-calling and the personal insults and the attacks. Where when you actually look, just
I'm excited to hear what he says next, but I think this is what she's doing. She's like, she knows that we are in this era where everyone wants to be a spiritual messiah of some sorts, influencer culture, whatever you want to call it. And especially the people who are drawn to her are very drawn to this kind of hollow spirituality, like kind of all light spirituality, unable to see like the darkness within themselves and truly acknowledge the darkness in the world. And so I think she's developed this character where she presents herself as this like messiah of sorts, like a spiritual messiah. And I know I have a sense of what he's going to say, but it's like she was name calling like Donald Trump all along, like all through the debate. She was bringing up like there was a moment where she brought up the Central Park fight from like 30 years ago and blamed him, like called him names for acting in a certain way then. And then like a minute later talked about how with her you get someone who looks forward, doesn't dig up the past. And I'm like, are you self-aware at all? Like, do you not see how you contradict yourself? I feel like anyone who has a radar for checking how someone contradicts themselves in speech and action should be able to pick up on this. And honestly, as I've sat with like what seems to differentiate people who are still drawn to Harris versus people who find her absolutely disgusting, is the absence of integrity in how they themselves live. Integrity in speech, like being able to say something and follow, like, and not self-contradict yourself, which is different from lying. It's very different from lying. It's also very different from changing your mind. It's, are there some core values that are driving what you say, and are you consistent in what those values are? Which is different from lying, and it is also different from changing your mind. And integrity as in, when you say something, do you actually do it? Which is where, her inability to answer questions around why hasn't she accomplished the things that she's promising in the current term already shines through me, that comes through as a lack of integrity issue. And yeah, I'm thinking of like people in my community who will say things oh, I will do blank, like I'll get back to you by this weekend, and they just don't, and they forget about it, and they say the same thing again, and they don't, and they forget about it. And it's, when I see someone doing that, but if you tell me if I tell you I'm gonna get back to you on something by a certain time, I'm gonna make sure that I get back to you. And if I don't want to do it, I'll tell you, like, actually I changed my mind, I don't want to do it anymore because it's not a priority for me. But I'll close the loop on you. And there's people who open many threads and never bother closing any loops because they have not put in the energy to cultivate integrity in speech, integrity in actions, who will completely miss the demonstrated lack of integrity in Kamala Harris's speech and actions. And again, it's very different from lying and very different from changing your mind. JD Vance's changing his mind from thinking Trump was the next Hitler to becoming his vice president is different from Kamala Harris bringing up shit about Trump's past from 30 years ago, and then in the next minute talking about how she is the candidate that is looking forward and not focusing on the past. Like, that is just lack of self-awareness, the kind of lack of self-awareness that leads to a lack of integrity. I have to go. Yeah, I'm conducting an internal family systems therapy session, practice session for a friend. My training starts tomorrow. Yeah, I'm training to become an internal family systems coach, I suppose, therapist, what are you going to call it? Like, basically someone who can hold space for someone else to do parts work. Honestly, like, I think Kamala Harris could use some parts work. Like, if I were her IFS coach listening to her debate, maybe I should do some content where I respond as the IFS coach to what she's saying and kind of present the self-contradictions. Then I would say to her, okay, I'm hearing a part of you that blames Trump for how he responded to the Central Park 5 30 years ago. And I'm also hearing a part of you that wants to see yourself as the candidate that is focused on the future and not on the past. And I'm curious how you relate to both of these parts. Like, that is a question I would ask her if I was in an IFS coaching session. This could be some good social media content. Responding as an IFS therapist to Kamala Harris's speech. Let me know if you'd like to see some of that. I might do that. That'd be fun. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. There is more of this video. I'll link to it in the description. And yeah, listen to Vivek Ramaswamy. I think he's legit. Yeah, his speech, his podcast with Ann Coulter is a good starting point. I mean, the way she was able to handle like the first 5 minutes of it. I mean, if every American is able to have that level of capacity, I mean, there'd be no healing work to do for anyone. Like, I think we would be in Satyug, which is the era of truth as proclaimed in Hindu cosmology. This is like, we cycle through 4 eras, and we are apparently at the end of Kali Yuga, which is the era of like lies, horrific abuse, and lack of integrity, and just everything is shitty. And then you cycle into the era of truth and integrity, like everyone is in full integrity with how they speech, act, and it's just a beautiful, glorious era. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. And yeah, I really love hearing how these videos land. So it really means a lot to me if you leave a comment, like it, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.